Well, good morning. Merry Christmas. I've leveled up to Stockfish level 3. Let's see what happens. Okay, good. He plays the England Gambit. Oh my goodness. Let me just make sure I minimize everything so I'm not seeing the actual board. Well, we're going to take it, of course. This is a somewhat clever move because it really coerces me to take on Passant. At the same time, yeah. Knight f3, bishop g5. Knight c3 to try and take advantage of the pin. I probably shouldn't draw arrows. So knight goes to d5. I mean, that's moving a piece 2 times in the opening. We don't need to do that. e3 versus e4. E4 might be a target. Difference between bishop d3 and bishop d3 could run into knight goes to c5, which is a pretty esoteric threat. Bishop d3 stops bishop f5, which I don't really care about. Bishop c4 is almost certainly not a bad move, and I can duck back to d3. I don't care. There's no way you can take advantage of this. Bishop d3 does control e4. So that way there's no h6, g5, knight e4 business. Because if I go bishop c4, h6, bishop g5, g4, bishop g3, knight goes to e4. I guess even queen d3 then works. I could also just go queen d4 right here. Hits the bishop. c5 is very committal. I could block bound to... Let's go bishop to d3. I think e4 is more important. I'm just making sure there's nothing going on in the e-file. So the knight d5 is a threat. Okay, so I can barely understand rook e7. Now knight d5 actually hits the bishop, hits the knight. There's a knight in d7. So goes to d5, I'm hitting the rook. Bishop can't come back. Knight d5 is just absolutely devastating. How do I not play it? It's not a question of playing it, it's just a question of seeing. I don't have a bishop on c4 to control it. Oh, that's terrible. Okay, so bishop takes h7 check. Assuming he captures. Queen d5, but then, funny enough, he can play f6 and he breaks that. Yeah, okay. That's not very good. Alright, gotta delete these Christmas emails I keep getting. Alright. Adversity. So clearly bishop c4 was the better move. Any tricks? Not really, eh? Okay, well, queen takes e7 at least allows me to pick up another pawn with bishop takes and then taking on d5. Okay, so my position is not great. He's got the two bishops. All right, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do here. So my queen's on d5. Just remember that. Well, I guess just rook to the center file. Okay, so does queen d8 do anything? Queen goes to d8. I think queen d8 is somewhat promising. Because if he takes, my rook comes into the back rank. I guess he can always play king goes to h7. Again, just really making sure he hasn't played bishop g4 or anything. So let me just rerun through all the moves. Yeah, knight blocked it in with d7, castle e3, bishop b4, bishop goes to d3, rook goes to e8, rook goes to e7. I got, yeah, queen takes e7. Yeah, so bringing the queen all the way down here, taking advantage of that back rank, so to speak. And then after... It just makes it hard for him to get out. Bring my other rook over. Aw. So how can I use this knight? So I would love to take the queen, but the knight on G8 unfortunately protects it. Which I admittedly did not see. There's no bishop F, moving at all. I guess B6 and bishop B7 is eventually possible. How can I increase the pressure? Knight D4 is terrible. Let's not do that. Knight E5, Knight G5. Knight G5 is possible because my queen X-rays through it. But I don't really see what I'm doing with Knight G5. Like, even if I had a second move, what am I going to do? Knight takes F7? Knight H4 instead? No. Knight goes to G5. So I can go to E4 and then... I guess the knight is somewhat more active there. Knight E5, just queen takes E5, and I don't think I've got anything. Yeah, I don't see a way. I don't have enough minor pieces to keep the attack going. So let's look at queen takes E7, knight E7. Bring my rook in. I'm assuming at that point king H7. That's a little bit risky. Knight E5 might be a thing then, but even then, just F6. Yeah. Knight G5, he could move his bishop, I take his rook, he takes me, right? Something like that. But you know what? Okay. So now he's got to be extremely careful. That was not the best move. So he's basically paralyzed after knight goes to G5. Because he can never get his king out. He plays something like F6. I can launch in with... If he plays F... I mean, okay, so knight F7, but then king H7, and then what? He can play king G6 next. And my knight honestly doesn't have a square. Knight goes to E6 instead? With the idea of taking on C7, I guess? Anyway, knight G5 just is screaming. It's absolutely screaming to me. One thing I'm looking out for if I play knight g5, though, is later when I play rook d1, bishop g4, discover attack on my rook, and then hitting this rook. So if I take his, he's going to take me, right? No, don't do anything. Ah. Oh, I didn't want to make a random move here. So maybe I take a moment to bring my other rook to the open file immediately. I could even then think about some sort of combination of knight g5 with rook takes g8. I think that's much better. There's still a bishop. Bad day at the office here. And the bishop is covering the g5 square, which is unfortunate. Okay, so well, I got to keep the rook on the back rank. Unfortunately, rook goes to whatever square this is, e8. Doesn't actually threaten the bishop because the knight, it's being pinned, but once I take it, it's not being pinned anymore, right? Well, still, I can't think of anything else. I got a really bad position. So at least now at this time, knight goes to e5 now, is threatening f7. And if he plays f6, g6 check, picks up the bishop. Doesn't have the same threat of checkmate, but I have to take what's given to me. Ah, there's that attack on my bishop that I was talking about. My rook's no longer connected. Oh, shoot, eh? Okay. So if I take his rook, he takes my rook. I take on f7. He goes to h7. f3, he takes my rook. Knight takes g4. He takes my rook. Well, gosh darn it, eh? Yeah. So c-pawn's hanging. f7 is hanging. So taking on f7. Take on f7. He's going to play king h7 and then I don't know, knight g5. That's really just coursing his king up. C3, just to defend the pawn. Well, I guess just c3. Yeah, keep the queenside pawns connected. Stopping bishop f6 eventually, right? I guess we just take on a5. So I got a lot of pawns at least. So rook takes h5 doesn't work. So where do I want to go? Do I have to? Can I carry a counter threat? g5 check. We're defended there, right? So that's fine. So knight goes to e5 instead. I mean, I guess it's doing it's all right. No, okay. King goes to g8. That's a terrible move. It really makes me want to just throw the check right back down there. Right? It's practically, it's not like checkmate, but actually any of the blocks work. No, not bishop f8. Well, let's do it. Let's see what happens. Yeah, because my knight is on g5. Once I land on e6, at the very least, I'm going to win the bishop. Not the bishop. I win the c7 pawn, or just, you know, the two bishops. So g4, attempting to coerce it. But then what's going to happen? g4. Let's say he goes bishop f7. Well, technically, he's not, like, quote unquote, threatening the knight, because I would just recapture. I need to go to the bathroom. But I can, because it's blindfold, think about it. Just give me 1 second.
Merry Christmas to my other childrens. I guess it's early enough now, eh?
It is.
Matthew, he's what, 3 hours behind us?
Yes.
Okay, good. Perfect time. Okay, have you wished anything yet?
No, it's on the to-do list. Actually, I should probably do that right now. All right, so I've got 2 plans. One is to just bring the knight right back to g5, keep the king out, and then just push b4, a4, and use my queenside pass pawn, because it's just the furthest away from the king. I think we start with g4, though. Yes. That seems like the trickiest move. Well, now it looks like f4, f5 is coming with tempo, right? Which is what we want. Right, so we come right back here. The bishop's on f7, right? King is on g8, right? Frick. It is on g8, yes? Yes. So now I'm thinking f5, because the bishop is on g6, yeah? f5. If he takes me, I take him, and he's stuck forever on that back rank, right? f5. Or h4 of all things. Just getting those pawns moving, right? You take me, I'm going to recapture. So that's my advantage. It's the pawns. Let's try that. I'm going to learn about endgames. All right, so now f5. Hits that bishop. That does absolutely nothing. Like, my guy's here, my guy's here. You're not threatening anything anymore. That's a piece. No? Bishop is on f7. For love of gosh. So I've completely lost the scope since I've been gone. So the knight went to e8. Rook takes a5. Bishop went to h5. Bishop f8. Knight went back to e8. The bishop already went back to f7. Okay. Knight went to g5. Okay. Not really. Okay, so now we just start advancing the king because his king is stuck in the back rank. And it's going to be for a little bit. Unless king f8 and king e7 are possible. Yeah, I guess so, eh? Well, I'm going to have to bring my king up regardless, right? So just sort of king g2, king goes to f3. e4, e5, that sort of thing. Yeah. Because I'm a tempo too short. e4, he's get bishop here. Controls the e5 square, right? All these pawns. right? Yeah. But despite that, I only have one passed pawn, and it's as far away as possible. Okay, so I think this a4, a5 plan makes a lot of friggin' sense. There it is. Frig, eh? Because now he's able to move that bishop. Like to d5, and I can't just cash in on e8. Not sure if I'm going to win this game. All right. So I think we have to. As soon as I say that. Wow, okay, well. That's a shame. Anyway, now I can just play my plan of throwing my pawns down the board. I can always throw my knight in on e6. It actually comes with check. So I can comfortably advance my pawn is what I'm thinking. Let's just keep the plan. What's the easiest? So I can take on b6. If you take me, I can recapture. You take me, I push b7, and you can barely stop that, right? Knight on e8 can come to d6. No, then there's a thing. No. Oh. Bishop is on d6. And knight is on e8 still? Has he moved his knight? From b6, f5, bishop. So knight is hanging. All right, so this is by far the longest blindfold game I've played. My knight's on g5, okay. And his bishop is on d6, okay. So I guess so we attack the pawn. Then we push h pawn, perhaps? We just put our rook on d5. That makes a lot of sense. Because that protects our pawn. I have not played e4 yet. Okay, you know what? Screw it. I gotta go from the beginning here. No scroll doesn't work. Alright, I've got to pause my music. Bishop to b4. Bishop takes f6. Knight takes f6. Bishop h7. Check. Discovery on the queen. I was too blinded by the knight goes to d5. Right? Bishop takes h7. Rook a goes to d1. Knight comes to f6, opening up the bishop. Knight goes back to g8, starting his back rank problems. Now I just takes. Knight g8, rook fd1, and this walks right into, not bishop e7, it's next. Rook e8, played a5. My knight jumps into e5, and that allows, very nice move, which I saw, but then walked right into. Knight takes f7 check, okay. Knight comes back to f6. I take on a5. Bishop comes to h5. Back to g5. He goes back. Back to a8. Bishop f8. Knight e6. Knight comes to e8. It's hanging by a thread. f4. Bishop f7. Comes back to g5. Bishop goes to e7. h4 to defend. I didn't fully realize I had the g pawn there, but okay. So I got this wall of pawns. b6. Bishop goes to d6. Yeah, he's got that like sort of fortress pawn structure. Now I get a4. King goes to f8. Knight takes f7. And then he just lets me take the bishop. Like right back to g5. Okay. So now I'm up in exchange and a bunch of pawns. Bishop goes to d6. b4. Bishop goes to g3. I push the pawn up. Pawn is still on e3. Back to d6. a5. Now c5. King goes to d7. b7. I take b4. Takes on b4. Takes on b4. Hangs e8. And I'm back. Here's where we stopped. Okay. So the simplest solution is to just advance that pawn as far as possible. Don't need to necessarily win the g-pawn. And if possible, I would like to just trade off his bishop with my rook. So let's go here. And then, because that keeps his king away, and then just throw the pawn up. It does absolutely nothing. I don't care. So I need to reroute my knight in such a way that it attacks you. So that would be f5. Maybe go to e6. Because then I can pick up the pawn. I have a pawn on f5. Huh. So I didn't have the full position. Here we go. Okay, so that was intense. Oh my. So by far the hardest, by far the most resistance. The computer did not randomly throw a piece. I honestly don't know if I would have won this. So for the record, e4 is a good move. Knight f3. This is considerably less good. Anyways, does no squeal work yet? There we go. Knight f3, good. Yep. All this is fine. it does. It has no preference. Slight preference for bishop d3. Castles. Bishop takes f6. So I'm really happy that I found that, you know, a year later. Terrible move. Yep. So all this is good. Rook goes to d1. It does like the... This is good. Rook goes to d4. Ah. Interesting. No advantage or anything, but there's the move. Bishop yeah, I completely forgot there's a bishop here. Yep, all good. Rook e8. So white actually has the advantage. The move here, knight d4 or knight e5. Yeah, knight e5. Okay, so I thought this was really good for black. So at this point, I guess I'm just up too many pawns. I didn't fully appreciate that. I still think, well, I guess you gotta take 4 pawns. All right. This does not feel like a +4 position. Or at least it didn't in my head. I perhaps got too excited about trying to win a piece here. Yeah, just take off one of the bishops right away. Because, anyway. Yeah, that was a mistake. Again, I thought the bishop was on e6 for whatever reason. But I mean, I'm still +4. I finally grabbed the bishop, and then he doesn't take it. Apparently, I could have just pushed forward with a4 immediately. That's what eventually happened. Then c5, yep. Yeah, it took me a little bit to fully realize that the knight was hanging. And this was nice and simple. Okay, wow. So again, that was a level 3. This is definitely where I need to be. Okay. Well, time for me to relive that game. Merry Christmas.